Hello, this lecture is going to talk about literature reviews and finding material for your literature review. So, what is literature review? And what are you looking for in your literature review? Basically, literature review gives you a foundation to build your own study on and to set the stage for your study. So what you're looking for are other research articles that have looked at research similar to yours or what you're interested in and can help set the stage for what you're going to do. So for example, when I did my dissertation on immigrants using the libraries, part of my lit review was looking at other studies, which there weren't a lot of, but there were some studies of how libraries and immigrants interacted. Some of them, there were not such great studies, and some of them were very useful. But I was looking at a new population and looking at a slightly different aspect of their interaction, but I needed those base articles of what had been done, so I know what's out there and what's been done around my topic, and the reader can get an idea of what's out there, what's surrounding the topic, what's already been studied and what we've learned, and then we build on it with our new study. Sometimes you're confirming research that's been done. You're looking at research and saying, okay, I'm going to use it maybe with a slightly different population, maybe with the same population, but confirming that the research that what they found is so. So your literature review will consist of articles that relate other research that's been done. And then you're also going to have a smaller component that may be part of the research articles or maybe a separate article on the theoretical or conceptual framework that underlies what you're doing. For example, if you were studying reader response theory, you would look at Louise Rosenblatt because she talks about reader response theory within the educational system in particular. And if that is gobbledygook to you, then there are other theoretic theories that you've studied or theories that you've heard of that will underpin some of what you're looking at. If you're looking at, somebody did a study last year on extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. So what are some of the, like what's one or two people who've written about extrinsic and intrinsic motivation who gives us an idea of the framework or the theoretical background for that. And I want you to look for that while you're doing the first parts of your lit review, but mostly, as I've spoken with most of you over the past week, we're looking to make your ideas more concrete. Looking at what other people have done, this will give you some ideas of other directions to go. You may refine your topic or maybe even change your topic completely. I think most of you are pretty set, but you never know, something can catch your eye and you're like, oh, I can do this and this really makes sense, and that's really the direction I wanted to go, not what I had thought I wanted to do. So your final literature review will have these two components. For right now, I want you to focus more on the other research articles that you're going to find. And actually, what is a research article? The research article that I want you to find for your lit review needs to be peer-reviewed. And the peer review, I've given you something to read on, I think, this week on peer review. But basically, a peer-reviewed article is something that has been sent to a journal, and the journal takes it and sends it out to people who are knowledgeable about the topic. hopefully, sometimes when you get an article peer reviewed, you're thinking, this person knows nothing about what I study. But basically, it's sent out to one or two other academics who do research in that area, and they read it and make comments. It comes back to the editor with a recommendation either to accept with revisions, or to just reject. And if it's accepted or accepted with revisions, I don't think few papers are accepted as they're sent in. So most of them are asked for revisions. The revisions come back, and then it's put into the journal, or this can be done with book chapters sometimes too. So basically, the idea of peer reviewing, and there's been some strikingly horrible examples of when it doesn't work, but it's supposed to make sure that the original author has had some feedback on what they've written, and people who are knowledgeable about the field will say, no, you've missed this, or you should add this, or you're not considering this. So you want a peer-reviewed article. Usually they include a lit review. If you know, the articles I gave you to read, I think in week 2, contain these elements. A short lit review. The lit review can look a little different in an article. It can be much shorter than what I'm going to be asking you to write for the thesis, and just hit on some key points from many different articles, rather than I'm going to ask you to do a more extensive summary in your lit review. The article will talk about collecting data, reporting results, and have a discussion and analysis. So how are you going to go out about finding these relevant literature articles? One thing is, you need to have a good idea of your general topic. We've discussed this, and I think we have all of you have a place to start. Questions you want to find out about in the research that have already been covered by others. You don't know if it's been covered, but if you look in the research to find what's been covered by others. And then think about your variable terms. We talked about our independent variable and our dependent variable. If you can think in terms of what you might be changing to see what will be measured, that can give you some ideas for keywords to search. And this might be for your second or third round of research. You're going to be starting out more generally, doing a little bit of reading as we define and revise and get to a better place on where your research questions and hypotheses are. So the lit review is not something you necessarily do once and done. You're going to be going back and dipping in a couple of times in order to find the best articles, and as you make changes, you may want to look and see if there's something else that you've missed. Some of the databases that I'm going to suggest you use for the library students, obviously library information science and technology abstracts, although one or two of you, if you're not doing something directly related to libraries, that might not be in there. But it covers a wide, that database covers a wide range of things. So you might find something in there. ERIC is good for educational subtopics. Academic Search Complete, ProQuest, Google Scholar, which I'm going to show you. It's a great resource, and you can, if you access Google Scholar through Chang Library, then it lets you know if the article is available full text through the library. So this is just an example of searching ERIC, and ERIC's interface may have changed a little bit. We'll go into it live, but there's some things here I want to mention, and this reminds me to mention them. what this shows is when you get your hypothesis, and I didn't want to start off with a hypothesis because I think it narrows us in too quickly. So, but what this particular search is, um, virtual manipulatives, their effect on problem solving, and the other thing you can look at is your participants. So they want to look at elementary in an elementary classroom. So the independent variable is the manipulatives, the problem solving, because they want to see the effect on problem solving. So that's the dependent variable. And elementary is the participants, which will bring you some articles. I think probably it's going to be too narrow a search in most cases, especially for library stuff. But what I wanted you to remind you is don't check off only full text. They have it checked off here, but don't do that, because what that does is only return articles that are in full text in ERIC or whatever database you're using. You will be able to, you'll have time to interlibrary loan articles. So if there's something that shows up, if you don't check full text here, it'll show you articles that we may not have in the library, but you'll be able to read the abstract, and it may be something that it's just perfect, so you can ILL it. If you check off full text only, limiting your results to full text, then you won't see that, and you might not find things that are useful. You do want to check off peer reviewed, because that's what makes it a refereed article. And you can limit your search to about 10 years back. As you can see, this is an example. So, you might want to, especially if you're getting too many returns, I want you to stay with articles in the last decade, unless there's something really seminal, a really important article that is you keep running up against when you do your searches, and you want to include that because it's a foundational type article. When you're working in ERIC, there's a difference between journal articles, which are EG, and documents, which are ED, and that's only in ERIC, and you want to stick with the journals. In ERIC, which is a database for education, the EDs are not peer reviewed, so they're not something that you're looking for your lit review. And this is just how to use the database. So there is a LibGuide for this that there is a link to on your see if this takes you to the right one. I forgot to check this beforehand. Which gives you information on research getting started, finding articles. Some of what I've said here is some of the things I'm going to cover is here. When it isn't available, it gives you ILL information. I'm going to give. There's also a short video in this week's Blackboard tab that shows you how to do ILL for articles. RefWorks, I'm going to give you another resource in the tab on using RefWorks, and talk about that in a minute, but this is a tab here. So this is a good place to go, this LibGuide, for information. See. Okay, I want to go into Cheng Library now to just go over, remind you, for those of you who have had a reference class with me, you should remember hopefully some of this. If you haven't had a reference class with me, that's why I'm going over it. Databases, some of the databases that I listed are listed here, so you can go into Academic Search Complete. EBSCO journals, ERIC, and you can look at, I don't know if these have different materials. They must, since they didn't have but the EBSCO host, and again, you have to put in your credentials when you're using this from a distance. When you're online and using this, you need to use your credentials that you use for your email and to get on Blackboard and log in. So it does have a very similar, it hasn't changed much, just where things are. So don't check off full text, do check off peer reviewed. Here's the date published, and here's the journal article for Eric. You can limit the language. Sometimes these come out in different languages, so you can limit to English if you want, if you find you're getting a lot of stuff, and then you can search. JSTOR sometimes can be useful to look at, not as much for this kind of work you'll be doing necessarily. Library Information Science and Technology Abstracts is a good one. And then you can go into Google Scholar, and if you look up, gonna look up where'd it go? Nonfiction children's literature. And some of these you can find, this is 1982, you can limit your range here so you don't get the older materials. Some of them are available on Google. I'm trying to find one. Here it's full text at Cheng Library. So if I want this, issues and selecting multicultural children's literature, I click on full text at Cheng Library, and it tells me, you have to go to full text finder, and it tells me where I can find it. So it says this article is in full text in ProQuest, here, and here. I usually pick the first one, hoping it's the best. And it'll bring me to the article. So that's really nice. Google Scholar is really useful. You can even do alerts in Google Scholar. I'm not sure where you do it. I did it. You can do a sign in and do your profile, and if you are interested in certain things, you can have an email sent when they are posted to Google Scholar. And you can sort by date. So Google Scholar is something really useful, especially if you're frustrated with the databases and aren't finding what you want, and then it'll take you back to the database. So if you find, another thing on Google Scholar I want to look, I'm going to mention this going forward. There's a thing called forward citation where you can find, these are all cited by Allah. Let's do this one. Let's do this one because it's in, you can go to JSTOR to get the full thing. This is 91, but it's been cited by 71 people. So if this article is cited in a newer article, it might be something that's useful. So if you hit the cited by articles, it'll give you a list of articles that have used this article in the Lit Review. So it may take you to something interesting, and it's called forward citation or forward chaining. So it's a way to expand your search. You can do that in the databases too. So wherever it gives you says cited by, you can also look at related articles, but you can also look in the database at the go back into library databases. You can also look in a database at the citations in the article, and that's backward chaining, which you can see if this article is relevant, they may have cited somebody a little bit older. So this is especially good if you have a brand new article that's right on topic. You want to see who they've cited, you look in their references, and you can try and find those articles too. So those are two ways to expand your search I also wanted to show you in the library you can look at individual journals. So if you have a journal that is working, that you're finding articles in, and you want to do a search just of that journal. So let's say I'm finding a lot of really good stuff in the Reading Teacher. So I want to go into Reading Teacher. It's available in these databases. This is also good if you find the citation in either backward or forward chaining, and so it tells you it's in 2014 volume 68 issue 1. I can go to that and I find, oh, there's my article, there's the PDF article. It's a really easy way. If you just have the citation and you want to look for the article, you know it's something that we have in full text. It's a great way to find it. Might be also you want to do a search just in Reading Teacher, and you can do that by searching within Reading Teacher. Search within this publication. Knew it was there somewhere. So you go in here and you're just going to get material from Reading Teacher. That's a really quick and dirty reminder on how to do research. So if you need help doing search, don't be afraid, don't be afraid to ask the librarians at Chang Library. They shouldn't do all your work for you, but you can certainly ask them for help if you're stuck, or if you're trying to find particular additional materials. I would like you to do the first searches on your own, and then as you get into the weeds, then certainly you can ask them for help. So some basic tips for reading research articles. It can be overwhelming at first, but don't get discouraged. And one of the ways to control, because you're going to find a lot of articles that really don't, that you think are going to be useful based on their subjects or based on their titles, but they may not be. Something else I want to show you in terms of searching, actually, I just thought of. The articles in databases are given subjects, and you can search by the subject heading. So if bibliographic, sometimes they're just not particularly detailed enough, but you might be able to click on bibliographic literature in the subject heading within the database and get a list of literature. I find that what I tend to want to do is combine two of these, and it doesn't let you click on, but let's say multiculturalism and pluralism is what we're interested in. So you might find something that way by just following the subject. And then they give you some searches. So if I want to do multiculturalism and pluralism and education, it's going to give us a slightly different search term. So come up with a great title. I read the title, I think of, okay, let me print this out, or let me put it in my wherever I'm going to store it. I would start by first reading the abstract and see if it really is something that is going to be useful. The abstract is usually available, even if you can't get the article, it's not available, the abstract is available. And that will give you an idea of whether or not this is useful for you. Then, okay, so we've read the abstract. Seems like it's going to be related to the topic I'm looking at researching. Read the discussion section. If you remember from reading in week 2, the discussion section usually comes near the end. It can give you an idea of, because they'll mention a lot of the key things that they've talked about throughout the article and in kind of a summary. So discussion and conclusion usually come at the end of the article. Read that. That might save you from reading the whole article because you realize it has nothing to do, isn't really helpful, isn't going to be useful. If you find the discussion section is useful, then you can go on and read the method the introduction and the results. So I would really do this particularly during the beginning when you're overwhelmed. You're still narrowing things down. Don't try and just sit there and read everything that you find that might have keywords that relate to what you're doing. All right, different types of literature that you might find. We talked about journals versus documents in ERIC. Proceedings are collections of academic papers that are based on a conference. These can be useful, but don't always have enough details for what you need. Because usually when you do a conference presentation, it's a shortened version of the research that you've done. And sometimes the presentation comes first and then the article, sometimes the article and then the presentation. Opinion pieces, not research articles. Don't include them in your thesis. You may look at something like Ed Leadership or School Library Journal and gives you an idea of where, you might read that as sort of a place to find keywords, or they might mention important scholars in the field or research that's been done, but it's not something that you're going to include in your thesis as far as your literature review. How-to articles or practitioner articles are written for teachers and librarians. It's basically the article that you would read saying, I tried this in my classroom and anecdotally it worked. It's not a research article. It's just what worked in their case, and which is less than what you're going to do in a way. I mean, you're going to look at something in your classroom, but we're going to try and measure it in some way, whether it's surveys or quantitative and qualitative collection of data. So these how-to or practitioner articles are not what you're looking for your lit review. There is a lit review article, which is basically an article that reviews a bunch of other articles. Sometimes it's an overview of studies. So it can be, if you find something like that, it can be really useful because you can read that article and it'll tell you, it's basically, on this topic, these people did this. And you can say, oh, okay, so this article is useful for what I'm doing within that article. You don't want to include an article that has like 6 different studies of, they're looking at all the studies done with elementary school children around, I don't know, flexible seating, something like that. You can go find the original article that they're talking about in this kind of lit review overview article, and then use that article in your lit review. But this is not the kind of article that you want to include. The overview article is not what you want to include in your lit review. If you can find one of these overview studies, there's a better term for it, which is I'm blanking on. If you can find one of them, it's a great resource, and it gives you a lot of places to look. So how do you expand your search? Check the abstracts for the articles that are most on target, and see if there's any other keywords that you can use in searching for your topic. The searching through the references is what we call backward chaining for articles, to find additional citations that are relevant. Back chaining, and then forward chaining is the cited by that I showed you on Google Scholar. So these can all expand your searches in finding additional articles. Searching the journals you found, you might find more. So I said you might find other ones from the resource. If you find a good author, you can go into an advanced search. I don't like ProQuest search, but you can look particularly for author. And let's see, Stephen Krashen, who does a lot of articles on reading. So I'm going to search for him. And you can see it's giving us articles by Stephen Krashen. Some databases allow you, maybe you have to go in here, to click on the author within the article details, and it will bring you up articles by that author. So if you can also do it that way. And finally, ask for help from librarians at Chang Library. The LibGuide gives you contact information. Like I said, you should be doing the bulk of the work, but if you're stuck in particular places, if you want a refresher on how to search databases well, other than what I've given you here, if you think that there's more out there and you're just not finding it, please do ask for help from a librarian. Last part I'm going to talk to you about is keeping track of what you're finding. RefWorks is available through the library. I've given you a link to RefWorks in today's tab, and also there is a link in the LibGuide. RefWorks basically allows you, let me go back to the LibGuide. Is it open here somewhere? I always get too many things open. Basically, it allows you to import if you find articles in the databases, you can import them into RefWorks, and it creates a citation for you, although it needs to be double and triple checked, because just because it creates one for you in any of these, EasyBib, Citation Generator, whatever, garbage in is garbage out. And there's one particular database, and I forget whether it's EBSCO or ProQuest, that they always have the citation wrong. Either the title's in all capital letters, so you need to use that APA 6 or Purdue OWL, which is another, Purdue OWL APA has a lot of good material on how to do citations. So even if you're importing it in RefWorks directly from the database, you still need, when you put it into the paper, to double check that they did it right, that the the capitalization is right, the commas are right, that everything needs to be right. This also allows you to take notes within RefWorks. There's a little bit of a learning curve, but it is one option available for keeping track of your articles. In terms of Dropbox, I use Dropbox a lot. I really depend on Dropbox. There's a free version, and I like Dropbox because it's a cloud storage, and you can put your articles in there. You can also put your versions of your thesis in there, and that way you always have access to it no matter where you are, as long as you have internet connection. Evernote tries to you can also get I believe a free version of Evernote, and basically it's notebooks and cards. So you have a notebook. This is called Evernote Examples, and you can put new notes in it, and each note is just a blank space. You put a title, you can tag it, and you can put links in here, you can take notes in here, you can add articles in here, so you can use it kind of like an old-fashioned set of note cards, but it's also in the cloud and always available. You can use old-fashioned note cards if you want. You can use Google Drive for collecting, you can use Google Drive for collecting your articles and all in one place if you want to keep them electronically. If you don't have your own Google account, or you only have Google through your school and you want something separate for this, I can set you up with a College of Education Google account. We have our own Google Apps for Education suite that you can use. And then Pam found a wonderful YouTube video that shows what she uses to organize her research in Google Sheets. it's really, really well done. If you're willing to set up, it's probably a lot easier to use than RefWorks. It won't generate a citation for you, but it's a very, very interesting way to organize your research. So if you're interested, you can take a look at that. It's about a half an hour review, but it comes out very nice. Watching, I didn't watch the whole thing, but skimming it, it reminded me that you need to be careful when you're taking notes to differentiate direct quotes from paraphrases. I would do as suggested in the video and use quote marks when you are noting a direct quote. So when I'm taking notes on something, if I am copying directly from the original source, I will put quotes around it in my notes, and that way I know that it's a direct quote. If I'm paraphrasing into my notes from the original source, I will not use quotes, and that way I know it's a paraphrase. And this is really important so you don't plagiarize and use unattributed direct quotes particularly. So, and in both cases, put the page number down that you got it from, because it's really annoying to go back. You have the direct quote, you don't need the page number, and you need, in APA style, you always need the page number for a direct quote. You may find references in some of the material that is still up on the website. I might not have gotten rid of all of it, that says in your lit review you cannot use direct quotes. I don't like this, and I'm changing it for the first time this year. You may use direct quotes in your lit review. It should not be just direct quotes. You should use them sparingly, and when you think that it's particularly well said in the original source and you can't rephrase it without losing some of the meaning. So, you know, if you use maybe one quote, possibly two from each source, that should be about the max. You shouldn't be, you know, you're quoting 6, 7, 8 things from each of your sources in your lit reviews as you put it together. As you're doing your lit review, some of the things I'm going to ask you to note, and you're not really ready to do this yet because you're just exploring, but just so that you know for the future, is you'll be looking at things you want to note are the participants, the methods that they use, and the instruments they use. And then a summary. What you're going to include in your lit review is a summary and weaknesses, which sometimes they will note in the paper. Sometimes you may have to look at the weaknesses and divine them for yourself. A lot of times, for example, a weakness of your thesis is going to be you're not going to be able to collect data for a long time because you're only going to be able to collect data for about 6 weeks. So that's a weakness of your particular thesis that you're writing, and something that you will mention at the end in the discussion of your thesis. So covered a lot here, but I think I'll post the slides from this to just as reminders, so you don't have to go back if you are looking for something. It might help you. And good luck in starting your lit reviews. You don't have anything to hand in this week. What I want you to do is to start your lit review and start figuring out how you're going to keep track of your articles, and figuring out, working on refining what we've talked about in terms of your research questions and your topic, and then your research questions. All right, thank you very much.